Now that we have some art assets uploaded to GitHub by the art doer, we can go into here, make sure we fetch the latest from the interwebs or repository up there, and then we can go down here, merge main into game code branch, push that up just to let it know that, hey, we did that locally. And then we should be able to see in Godot, we have our assets folder. So these are just preliminary assets that are for use in our game. So we got our background, our bar, the beer/drink. We've got Splorsh, Finstrong. I believe Splorsh is going to be the bartender. As well as patrons. I believe Splorsh is just a placeholder here. And so we can start constructing the game and all of the pieces. When I start creating a game, I really like to make a playground. I call it a playground because it's where I can just throw things in, try them out, play around with them, and it generally lives outside of like the main game scene. So to make a playground, I usually just make it a regular old node. We can name this playground, save it in a new folder. We like to organize our things as assets, scenes, and scripts, and maybe a couple other things depending on what else we add to the game. So we've got a folder for scenes, save our playground.tscn file. Those are the, I call them tscene, I don't know. But those are the scene files. And this playground is going to be where we construct our 2D game board. I like to treat games typically as like a board, a game board. A lot of games can be workshopped and play tested as like board or card games. So you can like write things down on paper and like play through the game step by step. Even if it's like a real-time game, sometimes you can do that. Sort of imagine jumping in a platformer and stuff like that. That's kind of how I like to think about it. In the playground here, in the 2D view, we see this blue box. This blue box also like sort of melds with the green and purple lines. They don't really get any thicker, so we'll just go back out. But sorry, they meld with like the green and red lines for the axes. This point right here is the origin. So this is where like 0, 0 is. So you go from 0, 0 to, in Godot, y goes negative, or it goes positive when it goes down. So negative is up for y, which is counter to how we all learned it in like geometry class with, coordinates and axes. So it's flipped upside down. X goes positive to the right, negative to the left. With this playground, we could easily just start dragging stuff in and have all our little pieces in here. We might want to add pieces as like kind of like game pieces, like game board pieces. Imagine a board game, and you have your game board. So let's actually create that first. And I will do that as dragging in just these images. So this image, it automatically turns it into a sprite when I drag it in. It's a 640 by 360, so that's the entirety of our game board. So if I reset the position, it'll bring it to the center. So what I actually want to do is drag this in and make sure that the X is half, because I want the top left corner to be, I pointed to my screen with my hand, I want the top left corner to be at the origin at 0, 0. So that means the Y has to go all the way down. So that's, or has to go halfway down because the midpoint of the sprite is in the middle of it. So we have to go halfway, both X and Y. So that's going to be 640 divided by 2. You can actually just type it in there, 640 divided by 2, boom, 320. Don't even have to think about numbers too much. And then 360 divided by 2 is 180, which is what it already was. I just got lucky putting it there. So that's our background, our very plain brown background. Then we want to put our bar in. Just drag our bar on in. And the bar, we want that to be like in the center of the screen, just because that's how this little mini game is going to work. The bar is going to be center stage. So we once again do that as 320 and 180, just like the background. And now we have our background and our bar. We want to place our tap that's like on the bar. Bring that, and we can just drag this around, move it around, see where it feels good. This thing's dimensions are 32 by 64. So if we want it to be in the middle of the bar, we would also put it at 180. So we have the midpoint at 180, but then we can offset it by subtracting half of the height of the image. So 64, half of that is 32. So we do 180 minus 32. Boom, our tap is nice and centered on the bar. And it looks, pretty nice. You can actually sort of start to feel a little bit of 2D depth as much as you can really get with very simple assets like this. Again, these are kind of placeholders. Then we move on to adding in our beer or drink. Same thing. We want to see what it looks like if we sort of center it in the bar. So let's do 180, and then this thing's offset. It looks like it's slightly offset on the top compared to the bottom, so it's going to look a little different. It's a 20 by 20 asset, so we just subtract 10. See what that looks like. Yeah, that actually looks pretty good. If we zoom in here, it's it's off a little bit, but sometimes having those things not perfectly aligned makes them look a little more real. So up like vertically it looks good, but horizontally it could probably move a little bit closer to the tap. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to like subtract, let's try like 4 pixels. It's a little close. Actually, no, that looks good. It's not perfectly centered, but again, sometimes imperfections make things a little more interesting. So having like the top of the beer sort of going over the top of the bar a little bit gives the idea that, oh, the beer is sitting on the bar, but also you can see more beer over the top of the bar. It gives this sort of like tilted 2D view, because that's what we're going to be going for. We're not doing a top-down view. We're doing sort of a, I don't know if it's quite isometric, but it's not top-down. It's not straight on. It's kind of in between. So I'll have to figure out if isometric is exactly that, but that's the closest thing I can think of right now. So with the main scene set up here, what we can then do is, this is sort of like the playing field with no characters on it. Let me try to zoom out a little more. There we go. So this is like the main playing field with no characters on it. And what we want to do is kind of like pretend like what the game's going to look like. So we're going to go into player here. We're going to grab Splorsh. We're going to be like, okay, what makes sense for where Splorsh would stand? And we just use our arrow keys to move them around pixel by pixel. We did all the pixel grid snapping and all of that. And I think it would actually make sense to have his head sort of down like that, I think. Because having his head over top, he's sort of standing up a little too high there. But I think having his shoulders over the counter, over the bar a little bit, might make sense. Like even just a pixel. Yeah, there we go. We've got like a pixel difference there, but that sort of gives that 2D depth of like, oh, okay, he's on this side of the bar, but he's not like completely overlaid on it. It gives that feeling of that depth there. And again, this is all setting the scene. We're not actually creating a functional game right now. We're just giving ourselves an idea of what things would look like. Next, we want to put in a bunch of patrons. So we're just going to throw in these guys, and we can Control D to duplicate. Whoop, rotated that one by accident. So in our game design document, we had talked about, here we are. In our game design document, this is what we kind of went through this morning to talk about the type of game we wanted to make. And when we talked about it, we have our theme, our player experience, as well as our screens. And so on the screens, we said we wanted 6 patron seats, and patrons would be like 64 by 64. So if we go back to Godot, we've got 5 patrons here. Whoops, drag the background there. And so we'll add a 6th. So you might be seeing these guys and be like, wait, hang on. They are kind of all standing on top of the bar. That's a little weird, or at least rude. So we will go in here and we could either change their ordering of visibility, but that would throw them in the background. And so for now, we're going to put them between the background and the bar. And that actually looks really neat. And then we want to take these guys. Oh, actually, we don't want to make them part of the background as a child. We want to figure out how to move that. There we go. So that looks really cool, actually. It really makes it clear that this is a dividing barrier. So what I can do here is bring this down, see where it makes sense. And it would probably make sense for them to have maybe their belt line over the top. It doesn't really matter too much right now since these are placeholders, but I do like the idea of making it look nice. So what we'll do is we'll actually just do like shoulders over. And the easiest way to get them all to the same height is just copy that Y value on the transform. Boom. And everybody's going to be at the same height. You can actually just copy that transform value into all of theirs at the same time. Additionally, we want them to sort of be spaced equally. We have a nice measuring tool here. So if we go from the edge of the screen there, I'm going to get like the actual edge. Yep. And I'm using some hotkeys. Control Shift Scroll gets me going to the side. Control Scroll goes up and down. And then just scrolling gets you out that way. So our window is 640. And we're going to go to, yeah, it looks like it's fair to put them in like a box of probably, well, if they're 64 pixels each, we have 6 of them. Let's just pull up a calculator really quick. This is just like raw in the process right now. So these guys are 64 pixels wide each times 6. So they take up a minimum of 384. Let's say we want to make these all 10 pixels apart. Let's do a nice number because let's do a multiple of 8 because that's like 64, 16, and 32 is what we usually work with. So let's do a multiple of 8. Let's just say they're 8 pixels apart each. So they would have 8 pixels of space between each other. So that means we would add on 5 8-pixel spaces. Whoops. So 64 times 6 plus 40. There we go. 424. So we're going to go 424 pixels spot is going to be 424. So it's going to be about there. Yeah, that's a good space because we want the ability to throw the beer too far. And so there's going to need to be an empty section at the end, which we could just make a 7th patron and simulate that. So it looks like, you know, we've got enough space here. We'll move all these guys over a little bit. Take out that and then just easiest way to space them actually is going to be find the X value of this guy, 180. It's convenient. Then we do 180 plus 64 plus 8. Okay, I don't know why that didn't work. 180 plus 64 plus 8. There we go, 252. And then this one is 252 plus the same thing, 252 plus 72. And then once again, 324 plus 72. And this is going to be helpful later because we're going to make slots for these guys, the patrons, so that we can basically spawn in a patron on each one or have it like in a slot, which we'll do later once we sort of make these actually interactable like pieces on the board. So 396 plus 72, and then 468 plus 72. Cool. That actually looks quite nice. I like the framing of the scene. I think our vision worked out pretty well. This is let's see what we had for our vision there. Yeah, that looks about right. So we're going to save that, and that is our playground initially set up. And so you can see the pixel weirdness that I was talking about earlier and why we wanted to have the integer scaling and all of that, because this isn't 640 by 360, and you can see the eyes are a little weird. Like some of the eyes are squished, some of them are not squished. And so as I zoom in, you can sort of see what I'm talking about, where like pixels sort of shift and warp as you start to get smaller than the 640, because it has to just delete pixels somewhere and display that in that way. So that's why we did all of those different settings on the project setup. Now that we have the main playground scene set up, we want to go through and turn all of these into their respective pieces. But we're going to commit our code up really quick